This week, Apple comes out swinging on the impact of digital on children.
And what about new Apple hardware? Nothing new from Apple gear for the faithful. Why is that?
Then Personal Democracy Forum looks hopeful.
And Culture Camp tries to solve urgent, vexing marketing problems. Did it work?
I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and this is Future Forward, the podcast for the optimistic and, of course, the paranoid.
I am both of those. And I'm Gene DeRose. This is Future Forward. Let's launch.
So Gene, before we get into, we got a lot to cover. We went to camp this week. You went to a camp. I went to a couple of camps. We're going to talk about summer intellectual camping. But before we do that, I got a preview of your loving and hating this week, and I'm already trepidatious about where it takes us. Let's start with loving. Who are we loving this week, Gene?
So I'm loving Quora, which is a historical love. They launched, I think they launched company and then product in 2008, 2010. They've been much loved for many years, especially by tech players. It was a classic example of something that had been around since .com 1, and yet someone came around and just completely rewrote the rules. Question and answer from anyone on the face of the earth, and let the audience and the community answer themselves. It's kind of, I consider it right up there next to Wikipedia as something that's people powered to great benefit. Now the problem, and so it was driven a lot by tech insiders, and so for the first half of its life, it was the place to go to if you wanted to have really good, honest dialogue and potentially some debate about which software package, what's the definition of this new technology, all these kinds of things. Here is where my worry is, because I can't love without anxiousness, and of course I can't hate without it being abandoned love, which you'll hear about in a second. I worry that they're a little bit like Foursquare in the sense that a great product, a great initial launch, a great idea, and right when they should start taking off, they forget or refuse to move into second gear and start marketing and customer acquisition with a broader set of consumers that are ready for them. Sure. I'm surprised to say they have yet still raised a lot of money. I don't think they burn a lot of cash at all.
And they have like a $1.6 billion valuation?
$1.6 billion valuation in 2016, which is shocking. I mean, I guess that officially makes them a unicorn. You never see them listed as such. And we can't say we know that much about what their business model is. But I really do worry that, what happens with these things is you can't let the information get old, and you don't want to look up something that's core. And because there was more activity in 2012, that's where you're going to get the most answers. So that being said, I really do love Quora, and anyone who hasn't spent time on it should give it a shot, because it deserves to have a vibrant market.
So now we're going to get to the hating, and you're going to get some mail on this. I'm warning you now. You're picking on a favorite, a fan favorite. Go ahead, hate away. Tell me what they've done wrong.
So I'm hating Lego, and the reason I'm hating Lego is they're taking the easy way out. They're taking the easy money on licensing. They're taking the easy money on pursuing partnerships with the Marvels and the Star Wars and the Game of Thrones types to do licensed version of their products, and even movies. People talk about Marvel, but for the kids' world, there's a sort of a second or third tier of movie and TV series that are wildly popular among 5, 10, 12-year-old, especially boys. And these things make tons of money. But if you flip over to the core product, while you can always guarantee that the latest sci-fi product movie is going to have a Lego iteration, they really have not evolved where they could on technology. There's a thing called Lego Mindstorms that is a wonderful attempt to use Lego in robotics at a basic and then increasingly evolved level. They have not updated that software in close to 7 years, which is really terrible. And you can do great things with it, but I have a son who loves this stuff, and he's left kind of, there's nothing else you can do right now. They may or may not update something soon, but who knows? They're also the sponsors of something really important and powerful, which I believe I've talked about before. Maybe I even loved this, which was which is a robotics competition spread out across the U.S., of which they are a sponsor. But I don't know if you're familiar with this. There's a version of sponsoring where you just kind of mail it in and let them use your logo, and you really don't participate in any way beyond that. This is a little bit like that. So I just think with all the money they're making, with all the coin they're minting, it would be nice to see them a little more aggressively moving things along. And we know what they're doing with Apple and others, and they're getting involved in some AR and VR and things down the road. But the core product could do with some improvements.
So before we pass on to the show, just one question. Have you been to Legoland?
No, I've not. Well, I don't think I've been to the big one like in San Diego. There's these other ones that are kind of mall-like ones. I've been to one in in New York, in Westchester County.
I have not been to Legoland, and to our listeners, to our friends and fans, if you're going to send hate mail about hating Lego, just send it directly to Gene, because I did not endorse said hating. All right, moving on. But speaking of passionate fans who may or may not love us after this podcast, Apple, WWDC complicated this year, right? I mean, the faithful came out. They wanted to see new hardware. They were, but let's start with what Apple did right. So Apple, came out and talked a lot about the impact of technology on kids and a whole slew of new parental controls, mixed press. Some people thought it was Apple giving parents great technology tools, and others thought it was, the nanification of Apple, and Tim being too conservative about his concerns. I poked around to see if iKid was an Apple term. It doesn't seem it is, although, as you pointed out, it's probably copyrighted somewhere deep in the bowels of their building. Look, I think it's worth remembering that the iPhone's been around for 10 years, and that it went from being this music device to then being kind of a perennial thing to then now being this thing that literally, there was a picture on the web I saw this morning that in China, in shopping malls, they now have lanes that they've painted for people that are walking with their phones. I mean, this happened. This idea that we now all have phones at the dinner table and walking down the street and all these things happened really fast. And so Apple's starting to say, look, for kids, we need to set some guidelines. I guess I think theoretically that's a good thing. I'm not sure how I feel about how they accomplished it.
Well, look, I think that what happens with maturity of things like this, especially if someone or a product or company has created something that is so pervasive and vast in its influence and, product, iterations, it's a kind of a sloppy mess, and, who knows who you'll be sitting next to in the audience. And I guess they feel like they still have to roll everything into this one big event every year. But I do feel like it would be better if they started dividing it up. I mean, the whole iOS world, iPhone, iPad, apps, and the development world within that, narrowly considered, is a vast, vast space. But when you start talking about other things that they're doing, and then you talk about other hardware, and then you talk about, other items, I'm not sure. I just feel like it just gets a little tough. So I think we should cashier that off to the side, because this whole episode in a way is about events, and they're looking at them in a postmodern way, and just fundamentally look at what they announced and what the implications are. And you had us teed up for talking about the kids stuff first, and I think it's really important. I mean, what do you think is the are they paying lip service to stuff that you just got to do anyway, or did you see anything that was notable and wow in that? I can't imagine all the Apple fans that go to these things care much about that stuff.
Look, I think data is powerful, and I think that for all of us, if you have ice cream for dessert 2 days a week, probably no harm, no foul. If you have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 3 times on the weekend, that's probably starts to become a real health matter. but you have the mental capacity to remember how many times in a week you've eaten ice cream. Very hard to be able to calculate how much time you're spending on Facebook versus how much time you're spending on theoretically things that are more, relevant to your life or more intellectually stimulating. So
I agree, but I would say that it is a noteworthy and worthwhile to try to chunk those things up. I will say, in watching my kids, and even to a certain extent my wife and I, that because they are more adept at video than they used to be, there's a little bit of just all the problems of watching TV too much are now creeping into the inside of what's happening with your iPhone and your iPad and your mobile use. If I don't watch it, my son will watch YouTube videos for like 20 straight hours. So, does this end up just becoming the same old vast wasteland, issue versus something educational? And when they lump, as that article did that we're linking people to, in, programming and design and writing in, those are very different. And so I really feel like nuance is really necessary here.
Yeah. So my hardcore Apple friends were pretty pissed off that there was no MacBook Pro. I mean,
right.
like
that's overdue.
Well, and the argument was that as Apple has become more of a consumer company, it's abandoned Aperture, it abandoned, depending on who you believe, it abandoned Final Cut, it's abandoned its Pro strategy, and that the MacBook Pro has such an infinitesimally small financial impact on the company that it's just been set off to drift. That's a bad thing if that's really true.
Well, it's true, and I do believe that this is the developers conference. What you have here are people that are developing largely on desktop or laptop Macs, usually with big screens, even if what they're developing is a lot of iOS and mobile stuff. So it's a little bit of the nature of the fraughtness of this stuff. I guess I would just exit the kids stuff by saying we're still in an era where no matter what lip service these companies are going to pay to helping us monitor or manage things, we are for the next 2 to 3 years still in the DIY, do-it-yourself range zone where as parents, you kind of take or leave whatever you might even half be aware of that you can do, and hopefully maybe in 3 or 5 years it'll be a little more sophisticated in terms of things that really help us. I think that just, people are just trying to play nice so that the government doesn't bug them too much right now, developers. So
let's go to camp.
Let's go to camp.
And let's start with your camp experience, because it was not a straight up tech camp, and then we'll swap into some of my. I had a couple camps. So tell us about Culture Camp.
So Culture Camp is kind of a one-man show put on by Grant McCracken, who's a very well-known marketing and branding guru. As much in the straightforward world of branding and media and advertising as in tech, although he's very smart and wise about tech. Has been a professor at MIT and other places, has published some great books, and he's a very well-known person. This was a one-day event, Culture Camp, held at the New School with a really wonderful, 150 people from all sorts of big brand companies, major agencies, and then the usual suspects from other places.
Was Boy George there?
Boy George was not there, but somebody who a friend of mine termed the doyen of plastic surgery in New York was there. Go figure what that significance is, and a few other pretty notable people. Some of the people that run local for Google out of New York City and things like that. It was 3 parts. Part 1 was a very professorial but compelling set of framing why culture is important and needs to be understood. And we're not talking about company culture. We're talking about culture being, the collective set of anthropological values and memes that bounce around within a nation, a world, a time. So first was an understanding how to deconstruct and bring that to bear in how you do your marketing. The second was looking at what's changing, because he offered a new way of looking at rapidly moving culture so that you could bring it into your campaigns and your brands and your company building. And the third was workshops, and it was wonderful. I got put together with 8 other people, and we spent about an hour putting together a whole framework for how we might introduce a new brand today. Hold on.
So just in the spirit of full disclosure, if you look at their website, he says the day is in 4 parts. So I don't know if there's a part that you consolidated, but
it might have been lunch. Probably consolidated the beginning part, because he did do a lot of to say that somebody talked at us for a long time is usually say it was terrible, but this had people at the edge of their seats, and there was a lot of good questions as well. So it was a good day, and I learned a lot, and it was a good kind of conference, because as we're going to talk about 2 others and looked at Apple, that was a narrow one that had a very good task and had a very roll up your sleeves practical meeting of the philosophical, whereas I think events today often struggle with the old, is it a floor wax, is it a laundry detergent?
So I went to horror camp. I went to an event. It was a 2-day event. I went for one of the 2 days. The NYC Media Lab fake news horror show. And, not to give away any secrets here, I guess it's not a spoiler alert because the event is over, but I went in fairly prepared that I had seen every horrible thing I could possibly see, and I saw some pretty flippin' scary shit. I mean,
give us a snapshot. What was the new horror?
Every other thing I've been to about fake news was, we're going to fix it with AI. We're going to find that, Facebook is going to man up. We're going to dial this down. We're going to put new, barriers in place. There was, there were all kinds of, in the other things I've been to, kind of positive news about the way we were going to stop fake news. And this was really more of a parade of the technology that I saw, and I saw quite a bit of it, was just basically like it was almost gleeful. It was like, hey, we're going to be able to take your voice, and if you've been in the media and we can gather a bunch of Gene and Steve talking, and by the way, both of our audio is out in the world, right? Our conversations
right.
We can feed it into an algorithm which will almost instantaneously give you, if you're being a good guy, the ability to take the text of a blog post and turn it into a podcast without you having to read anything.
Yeah. Steve, you told me offline before, and look that in a way everything else before has said, like, here we are at the bottom of the pit, how are we going to get out of this pit? Whereas this thing is about doomsday scenarios. What if we're only halfway down, sliding into the pit? So powerful.
So Gene, imagine, as I thought about it, right? So imagine if my wife's phone rings and I say to her, hey Pam, I at the ATM and my card's not working. I forgot our password. What's my ATM password? And the voice is absolutely, without a doubt, me. Would she tell that recording the password of our ATM? Absolutely she would.
Yep.
Would she say, what's the color of our first car that, what's your favorite band? Of course not, right? You wouldn't have to quiz your spouse on their authenticity if they're using their voice. But already that ship has sailed. That technology exists.
Yep. Being used.
Being used, and it, and by the way, I'm going to pick up my phone so that I can tell you the name of it, because it's you can play with it today. It's free and it's out on the web, and it is called, here we go. Not that. I literally took a picture of the screen. Lyrebird. Lyrebird. You record 50 sentences off a screen into a microphone, and you can then produce sentences of the computer speaking as if it is Gene DeRose.
Wow.
Used for good or for evil, I don't. And by the way, there's an Adobe product, Vocal, there's been a bunch of press about. This technology is like, this is not specialty stuff. This is going to happen. It's happening.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a. I get the intellectual overlap between, security and identification, fakery and fake news and journalism and kind of that stuff. Did they go down? Was it a lot of fear over our personal security that dominated, or were there scenarios having to do with what the Russians might do in our Facebook feed next year?
Yeah, no. So Roger McNamee spoke.
Oh, Roger spoke. We love Roger.
Yeah,
he's a friend of the show.
And I actually wrote a long blog post about what he said, because he has been fighting the good fight since 2016, trying to get his friends or former friends, I guess friends, at Facebook to pay attention, and been entirely unsuccessful. And Roger is no shrinking violet.
Nope.
And he says the only thing we can do if we don't want the midterm elections controlled by bots and fake news and algorithms is essentially get reasonable right-headed people out to the polls in droves. Because he said there's not going to be a technology fix in place before the midterms. The only thing that's going to change is we can literally, outnumber the number of people that are confused by them.
No doubt about it. Yep, no doubt about it. And he also has asked people like Zuckerberg, to whom he used to be somewhat of a mentor, to try as hard as he can to be more honest and less political. Ask themselves the tough questions. Don't do nice talk about what it is you're doing. Don't let yourself be deluded by your own better stock price possibilities. Yeah. And he thinks they've tried to be honest but have just bungled things terribly when they didn't need to.
So Justin Hendricks runs the NYC Media Lab, and it was his event. And he said about midway through, this may be the best thing we've done all year. And everyone in the room, I mean, like, even if you came away thinking that you knew everything about what was going to happen in the world, it was clear. I mean, and part of the reason why it's so troubling, not to be a buzzkill here, but like, you might theoretically say, hey, let's get the government involved in setting some policies and practices about, the impact of allowing things to be fake on your platform. But the reality is there's no version of this government as it currently is construed that is going to be fighting fake news. Like, it's just, right. and you don't want them to.
Right. And they don't. Right. And them fighting it would not be what we would want them to fight. They would use it for their own purposes. So who attended this? Do you feel like this was reaching a good audience of people that needed to be, set afraid?
No. I mean, it was a lot of people, there were a lot of people I knew. It was a lot of people from the tech community. No, it didn't. It wasn't like there was a room full of people that were going to be like, wow, I didn't know this. It was more like a mid-game update on how kind of disastrously far behind we are.
Right. Well, it sounds like a great one, though.
It was. But I'm still echoing around in my head. I'm going to write a thing about Roger McNamee and what he had to say, and I'll post it in the comments.
Good.
And then the last summer camp, because it was summer camp week here at Future Forward, was I went to what was I think I'm going to say 10th anniversary, although I should check the actual date, of the Personal Democracy Forum, PDF, which has been around a long time.
Created by our old friend Andrew Roche and Sifri.
It began as technologists trying to kind of light up civic civic journalism and civic politics around technology. It's changed over the years. This year, you know, they're really trying to be bipartisan, although it still, to me, felt very much like a Democratic gathering. But, you know, again, it felt a little bit like the house is on fire and they were handing out Dixie cups of water. I mean,
yeah.
You
and
know,
it's hard if you're doing that kind of thing over 10 years not to, you know, repeat yourself a lot if you're trying to be big thinking, or if you're in an off election year or whatever else. I think it has a tendency to be, I don't know what their pricing looks like these days, but you've got very attraction for high level people and strategic thinkers and journalists. And also there's a lot of people that are, you know, it almost feels occupational in a good way for some of these things. If you're a person working in civic, digital, you know, in the weeds, you could learn a lot here.
Yeah. The title of it was, you know, 2018, How We Make Good. And I felt like that read, like I kept rolling that around in my head, like I got to make good on that promise. I got to make good. We have to make good. We have to do good.
It's a
like,
tantalizing title. It's I hope they were completely mindful of all the implications of that.
I'm sure the answer is they were. Listen, we're almost out of time, and I want to throw you a bit of a curveball because it just occurred to me we didn't talk about it before, but I think we got to just spend a second and talk about the changing of the guard at Verizon, and Lowell McAdams stepping up to executive chairman for 3 months or 6 months and then essentially out. I read a lot of the press. Having the CTO step up to CEO would be a surprise if it wasn't. In fact, he'd been the CEO at Ericsson until, I guess, 2 years ago. So maybe he's always been the CEO in waiting. But anything you make of that? Anything interesting?
You know, we hinted at this last week or the week before in talking about AT&T and Randall Stevenson, and I think that what they appear to be doing or not doing is it feels a little bit like more of the same, in the sense that we're talking, you know, telecom and telecom and networking tech people who've been around forever, and I'm not sure it helps them become a media player or sends more of their people to the, you know, Allen and Company retreats, or puts them.
In fact, all he talked about in the announcement was 5G.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, that's insanity. I mean, you know, here's the thing about that. They're not the kind of consumer product or consumer brand that they used to be, and I have already hated Verizon once and may do so on a regular basis, because I don't really want to hear about that when these companies have the worst customer service in the place that needs the most customer service and support. I mean, it's just terrible what people have to go through to get their homes wired, to manage through. Talk about fake news, you know. There's still, the thing is trying to book you cellular data when Wi-Fi is all around you. My kids go over every month. It's just a nightmare. So the other question, and then we'll be out of time, but so I poked around trying to see if anybody had anything intelligent to say about whether or not the changes at Verizon were good for Tim Armstrong and the Oath, AOL, Huffington Post side of the business. And it was literally like the telco made a change and it didn't dribble net, you know, does Tim stock rise or fall with this change, or is it irrelevant? It's the minute I hear about it, I think about Tim, and I guess I would have thought, I don't know enough about how he would be in managing a large communications enterprise on top of other things. He's always come from marketing and sales and has really done a good job at moving into media, but the guy knows startups, knows investments, knows scale. But it doesn't look like he was edged into a position where he might soon become that person. You know, maybe it doesn't matter if he's well protected and he can ride herd over everything within the media empire there. That's great. I've still yet to hear a compelling explanation for at a deep level, the synergy there versus the sort of feeling of a conglomerate.
All right, I'm going to say one word to just put a pin in this for another day, but it's time to talk about Tumblr. Not today, but maybe next week. And with that, we are out of time.
Yes,
so,
sir.
Future Trump, future forward, and we will see each other again next week.
Look forward to it, Steve. Bye, everyone.